Welcome to the Breathwork Summit, a free online event where you'll learn from top experts about integrating the power of your breath to transform your health and well-being. Share this powerful program with your friends and family, and come join us on Facebook at The Shift Network. And now your host, Jessica Dibb.
Welcome to the Global Breathwork Summit, everyone. This session is called Contacting Your True Nature, Tantric Breathwork and the Joy of Surrender. And our faculty is Judy G. Judy brings a wealth of experience in Tantric Breathwork and a lifelong immersion journey into the contemplative practice of self-inquiry, as well as an abiding devotion to clarity and wisdom. Judy is currently deepening her own engagement with non-dual awareness through teachings focused on surrender to the spiritual heart. And Judy is a longtime colleague and friend of mine who has also been very instrumental in bringing the art of breath work into an ethical and with beautiful and coherent training standards for breath work. And so it's just a delight after all these years of serving breath work to play with you, Judy, and have people experience and be invited into how deep the breath can really take them. So welcome.
Thank you, Jessica. It's wonderful to be here and to see you again. Thank you for inviting me.
It's an honor. So let's talk about, first of all, let's define our terms, because we're going to be talking about tantric breathwork and the joy of surrender. And I think there's a lot of interpretations of the word tantra and tantric that aren't really true to its original purpose. And I think that you're really trying to utilize that tantric orientation of non-dual awareness with the breath. So why don't you tell us what you mean by tantric breathwork?
So that first of all is a very good question, and thank you very much for asking it, because Tantra is a vast subject, and in the modern world there's often a confusion about Tantra, that Tantra is only something that's related to developing and deepening sexual connection. And in fact, sexual connection can be a part of Tantra, but Tantra is a much broader field, because the real meaning of Tantra is union, a union with all things coming together. And that's the type of Tantra that I'm interested in. I don't have anything against the sexual energy, and we can use the sexual energy, but we're approaching union from a very much broader perspective. Tantra or union is something that we actually do with ourselves. And that's the focus of my practice. And that's where the breath is connected to that practice.
So, Judy, say more about union, and union with the self. But first of all, really give us an understanding of what are all the different things that we are inviting into union.
When we're talking about union, we're talking about becoming one with something. And so for me, what matters about union is the investigation into how does union actually happen? How does one become one with anything? And the way I see that we can create union, and that we do create union, is through getting closer, through getting connected, through becoming intimate with things. And so the real quest of Tantra is to get intimate as close as we possibly can actually to ourselves. Tantra is really nothing to do in the first instance, and even the second or third instance, with anyone else. It's a story about how we relate to ourselves. How do we relate in our inner world and with all of with everything that arises in our inner world?
So we're going to talk then about tantric breath work. Why don't we start with just your initiation or your being invited somewhere in your life into the field of breath work? What opened up for you? Why did it become, I mean, it infuses your life now, conscious breathing. How did that happen, and what are some of the powerful experiences that you've had that have caused you to just be devoted to it?
Mm-hmm. Very good question. So I first got involved with breathwork when I was 17, 18. I had my first breathwork session, and I found it so incredibly powerful that it actually scared me. And I felt that I was, as much as I was attracted to it, I felt that I wasn't mature enough to deal with all of the material that was arising in me. And so I put that on a back burner and then came back to breath work around about 5 or 6 years later. And by then I was more mature. And by then I was definitely much more ready to embrace breath work. I was really ready at that point to work on myself and to purify and to understand my story. And I had the burning desire to transcend and was longing for mystical experiences and was feeling that I had that necessary stability in order to be able to hold the space for myself. And it just turned out for me that breathing was perfect. I was always interested in healing modalities that worked and that weren't cumbersome, and I wanted to travel light, and so there really couldn't have been a more perfect modality for me than breathing, because it's with me all the time. I can do it anytime, and I also just found that I very quickly was having many powerful, very deep experiences, and I loved the fact that I was the master of my own breathing process. I could discover and learn and experiment and take the breath where I wanted it to. And then I could also discover and learn and experiment with that. The breath was also taking me to places. And this is where I began to understand about this notion of surrendering, that breath is actually a conscious living entity. There is intelligence in the air. There is intelligence that comes in with the air. And there is this living, intelligent, intuitive, sensitive, respecting, paying attention and never imposing and yet desiring presence that was entering into me and penetrating deeper into me when I was practicing the conscious breathing. And this is really what, for me, created my deeper attraction and ongoing affinity with conscious breathing, because slowly as time went by and slowly as that conscious breathing become part absolutely and entirely of my daily practice, there was this growing and deepening realization that I was actually, through this process of the conscious breathing, have been interacting on a very intimate level with something that's intrinsically divine, that's intrinsically, infinitely loving and wanting to deepen relationship with me. So it's become like a kind of a long conversation and a really happy marriage that I've been enjoying now for more than 40 years. And so, like every good relationship, it's part of my daily life.
So it is, in fact, a kind of perfect vector for, as you say, bringing you to that infinite, deepest self and that place of surrender. And
yes, it is. And what makes it so perfect is that it's always available. Always available. Breathing is with us all the time, and so there never is a moment when it's not a good idea to breathe consciously. So that alone makes conscious breathing an incredibly valuable practice, because it is with us as long as we're alive. Mm-hmm.
Agreed, 100%. So with tantric breathwork, here's this perfect vector for the place of real surrender to the deep self. And that takes us into union. Our deepest self is everything else, in a sense. Our deepest self is one with everything, literally. So tell us about why do you even call it tantric breathwork? Why do you delineate that name? What are you doing in terms of orientation, or in terms of even the pragmatics of how the breath work is done in the session, that you want to call it tantric?
Well, because Tantra is a practice of union, and because union happens through becoming connected and closer to all things, and because my particular subject is connecting with the true nature, it just makes perfect sense for me to call breathwork tantric. Also because my understanding of tantric breathwork is it belongs to the lineage, a very noble lineage of Kashmir Shaivism. And so there's a very noble tradition going back through thousands of years to a certain philosophy of life where the breath was used as a means of transcendence, as a means of revealing the true nature. Tantric, because in this approach, we see the inhale as being Shakti, as a generating, when we're breathing in, we're generating Shakti, we're generating prana, we're generating chi. And on the exhale, we're surrendering through the out breath and moving towards Shiva. So we're actually embracing and containing and acknowledging the masculine and feminine principle that's in the breath through the inhale and the exhale. And that alliance, that collaboration between that inhale and that exhale is strengthening our feminine principle, and then taking that feminine principle, that chakra, that Shakti energy, and offering it to Shiva, which is the absolute, which is the stillness, which is the calm abiding. So over the years of my practice, I have come to understand at what is a very simple but quite really, really deep level. Breathing itself is a dance between the masculine and feminine principle. And because most of us in our lives will emphasize the inhale, are more focused on the inhale, we're not often paying as much attention as we could to the exhale. And the exhale is actually the vector of surrendering. There's a certain way to exhale that creates surrender. And when surrender happens, opening happens. When opening happens, connection happens. So there is a whole art and matter of understanding really exactly the best ways that we can breathe to get different results. And the result that I'm particularly interested in, of course, because I'm interested in the true nature, is how can we breathe to get as close as we can, as effectively as possible, to this true nature. And the breath can show us the way to do that.
So, Judy, you were speaking with so much transmission about the differentiation of the quality between the inhale and the exhale, and particularly about the exhale as this place of surrender. Can you both say a little bit more about the quality of the inhale and the exhale, and maybe even give us an experience of it?
Yeah, I will do that. So let's talk a little bit more about the breath first. First of all, when we breathe consciously, we're using conscious breathing, first of all, to settle the mind. And so we can focus on the breathing for a period of time, and that will give us the settling of the mind. And then we also want to be using intention, because intention gives the energy that we're breathing with a direction. So the way I like to work with that, as I've just already mentioned, is to have this focus on every inhale. We are generating Shakti energy where we're calling the Kundalini in, we're calling it in, we're calling it up, we're energizing ourselves, we're generating a charge within ourselves, and then we're going to be focusing and sending that charge somewhere. And so the object of the direction of our breathing in tantric breath work is the divine union. So that breath is being focused towards this principle of Shiva, which is the absolute, which is silence, which is stillness, which is radiance, which is holding energy. So the way we do that is that we follow every inhale in, and then because it's conscious connected breathing, we let it turn around and become the exhale. And with our awareness, we follow that exhale all the way out, almost to the end of the exhale. And when what feels like our physical exhale is ending, there actually is a little tail end that continues on our exhale. It's almost as though we can imagine if we were breathing down into the pelvis, and then that exhale would get just round to the coccyx, and it would just curl around the coccyx, and then the wave would come up again. It might look at the outside as though we're stopped breathing, but actually there is this little afterglow to the breath. And that is a very, very interesting and valuable point for us in the tantric breath work, because when we take that exhale out to its bottom line and it almost becomes a pause, this is the place where we're at a portal that can elegantly and gracefully and simply and sometimes quite easily open into much deeper stillness and peacefulness. And from there comes this sense of going beyond the mind, of going beyond the self, and beginning to connect directly with the true nature. The exercise is very simple. So what we could do is just practice that a little bit. And so doing that, we can do that with eyes closed or eyes open. It's probably easier with eyes closed. And then as soon as the eyes are closed, we bring our attention to the chest, to the heart area. And we simply allow the inhale and the exhale. We allow the breathing to happen, and we'll deepen it a little deeper on the inhale. So there's a full inhale opening up into the chest area. And then there'll be an easy exhale that we just let drop down. This type of breathing is soft and gentle. We have a little more inhale than the exhale because we're generating, because we do want to build some energy. And then we let that exhale drop. It drops down. It drops down. As it goes out, it becomes quiet. And as we get to the end, we let it turn around and we bring it back in to the next inhale. And we want to be focusing on this notion of the masculine principle, the Shiva principle, which is the holding energy, containing all that is. And the Shakti energy, which is the feminine principle, which is the life-giving principle and the creative principle. And this Shakti energy is really wanting to be received by the Shiva energy. And the Shiva energy is really wanting to receive the Shakti energy. So there is a magnetism between these two energies. And so we're exploring and feeling, experimenting with this notion of mutual attraction, of cooperating together, inhale and exhale. As we breathe in fully, we feel the life force energy. As we breathe out, we imagine we're bringing that life force energy to the beloved. And what happens in the tantric mythology, which I love very much, is that we would say that in the end, Shiva swallows Shakti. What this actually means is that everything we create, everything we become, everything we long for, we offer it to the Absolute, and it is received by the Absolute. It is swallowed, and this is how we actually disappear as a small self into this much larger self, which is the Absolute self, the beyond self. And this is where the surrender happens. Surrender happens thanks to a passionate longing, a passionate desire to go deeper, to be received. And so as we're doing this breathing practice, we will intensify the practice by focusing our energy on the longing that we have for deeper connection, the longing that we have for more love, for pure love. We focus our longing on this desire that we all have to really know what pure love is, what pure acceptance is, what pure unconditional acknowledgement is. And as we focus our intention into that longing, that intensifies the magnet of what the magnetic effect of what we're doing with our breath. So we can spend a few moments, a few minutes doing a practice such as this, and right now, a few more moments. And really allowing this exhale to drop softly and gently away until it comes to what seems to be the end of itself. And then from there, the next inhale is born. And this Shakti energy arises again to then be received back in to the Shiva energy, and this ongoing giving and receiving mixing and mingling, getting closer and closer to the heart of our deepest self is cultivated. And then when we feel ready, we can open our eyes and pick up the next moment of our lives, moving forward into the next experience. There's a very lovely quote from Rumi, who's a very favorite 13th century Sufi master. He says, "Embark on the journey of love. It takes you from yourself to yourself." Mm-hmm. Also, another Sufi master, Kabir, "Wherever you are is the entry point." We begin where we are. We don't need to be masters of the breath to explore the breath. We just need to be able to breathe. We don't need to be mystic masters of the universe. We just need to know that love is the way that we get anywhere inside of ourselves, and love is the way that creates all doors to open. We start where we are. We start with the small things. We get closer, we get connected, we become more intimate. And this is what opens the doorway into our deeper self. And breath is the method that we use to move further and deeper in the direction that we're heading. Mm-hmm.
So, Judy, when you speak about that place of surrender, and it's just really that letting go, you speak about in your title the joy of surrender. So I think, again, like we're redefining Tantra to be what it actually is, many people have an idea of surrender that's based on a kind of conflict model. You know, like you're just surrendering a position, or you're surrendering to something else. And here you talk about the joy, you talk about intimacy and the joy of surrender. So can we talk about what surrender actually is and why it's joyful?
Well, first of all, submission is not surrender. And there is often a confusion between submission and surrender. We submit when something bigger and stronger and more powerful than us imposes itself upon us and we feel that we have no choice. This is submission. And this actually causes us to close down, because imposition is a manipulation, and no living organism can open and blossom in the face of imposition. That's manipulation. It's abuse. A surrender, on the other hand, is something that happens when we are being invited to open. And the invitation is so irresistible that it's actually the obvious choice. In fact, it's not even a choice, it's just something that happens. And surrender happens under certain conditions, and some of the most important conditions for surrender are safety and security. So when we feel safe, when we feel secure, we open. Our heart opens, we become playful, we become trusting. These are the conditions that we need to blossom. And we do blossom when those conditions are met. And so that's why I talk about surrender as being a joyful experience, because when we surrender, something opens. And what happens when we open, when something opens inside of us, is that more energy flows, more love flows, the heart opens, there is more love, and we're getting closer to our true nature. And because our true nature is joyful, there just becomes more joy. And the more there is joy, the more there is spontaneity. And the more there is spontaneity, the more energy there is. And the more energy there is, the more courage we feel and the more enthusiastic we feel. And there is this crescendo of domino effect of inner states that get triggered once we feel the opening that starts happening. And because this opening is not actually really an opening to something outside of ourselves, it's an inner opening. We are opening to the mystery of ourselves and to the miracle of ourselves, to this never-ending, infinite opening inner discovery world of deepening and deepening connection. And something happens when we intuitively, instinctively begin to get it, to understand for ourselves the way that we need to do it. Because let's remember that there's lots and lots and lots of instruction booklets. There's lots and lots of methods. All of the traditional sutras are informing us, giving us instructions about how to connect with our true nature. And those are instructions, and they are useful instructions. And yet every single living human being has to work out the instruction manual for themselves. So we have to be listening. We have to be really paying attention to what works for us. Just like when we're in an intimate love affair and we don't really know from moment to moment what's going to work. We don't really know what's going to bring the joy in. We don't really know what's going to help us to relax and go deeper and open. But we can find a way if we pay close attention. There is a deep and sustaining joy in learning about who we are at such a personal and intrinsic and intimate level. My experience with the surrendering way is that it just keeps revealing to me more and more joy, boundless joy, infinite joy. And I have never found a way that is so full of mystery. And because I'm very curious, and I believe most of us are curious about ourselves, we're curious about the universe, because joy is our true nature. When we're surrendering to this true nature, which is joyful. And we just have to experiment with that and discover it for ourselves.
So we're speaking that opening and the recognition of our true nature.
Yes.
There is joy, and part of the recognition of our true nature is recognizing that we are not separate from anything, that we are of the same material as everything. So this is where the whole feeling of intimacy, that we become intimate with all things. And that means that it would be like everyday, ordinary, and extraordinary. And so there's breath work, tantric breath work sessions that we dedicate to that deepening into that oneness, into that intimacy, into that surrender, into the blockages from that. What about just living our lives in an everyday, ordinary way? What are some of the tools? You've said that conscious breathing is like infused into your life. What is So what are some of the practices and tools that you use to have this intimacy with all things in just everyday life?
I use conscious breathing really all the time. I mean, every day, in small things and in big things, because it's just so effective. I have periods in my life where I have a more sustained practice. I mean, at the moment, for example, I sit, I meditate, I use my breath to go in. I use my breath as the entry point, and I sit with my breath through the meditation session. And that's incredibly valuable for deepening the connection with the true nature of all things. But I don't only do that when I'm sitting on the meditation cushion. I also like to breathe when I first wake up in the morning, when I'm still lying in bed, when I'm still snuggled up and cozy. And I'll do some connected breathing then. And then when I'm at my computer, I'll do some connected breathing, and I'm using the breath more and more. I see that I used to do a lot more what I would have called official sessions of breath work. And there can still be phases in my life when I might do that, when I might go for a series of breathwork sessions. But what I've discovered as the years have gone by, and it's become more and more my primary ally in life, is I just do the conscious breathing for a moment or two here or there. In fact, really basically, in any moment when I realize that I'm tensing, that I'm stressing, or that I'm reacting, I'm feeling aversion, I'm pulling away from whatever is coming towards me, I'll take an in breath consciously and relax on the out breath and just let that go and soften the diaphragm and remind myself that what I want more than anything is to be connected, and that anytime that there's any stress or distress, reactivity, it's because I'm starting to feel separate from existence. And I really do not like feeling separate from existence. There's nothing I like about it as a felt sense experience. It's extremely uncomfortable. I know it's stressful for the organism. And so I use the breath. Oh, yes. It's like inside of myself, I'll be saying, okay, darling, let's take a breath. Oh, yes. I'm breathing. I'm alive. I'm happy to be here. My heart is happy. I'm saying hello to my heart. Everything is well. We're fine. All is well. I relax on my exhale. Settle back. Heart is open. Breathe in again. Embrace the world. Welcoming the world. And I use this in a myriad of different situations in any day. And then by the end of the day, when it's time for the end of my day, I might even do a little bit of breathing. When it's time to go to bed again, and it's just a constant. And I find that is really, really good medicine. We can also be specific with the breath. I'll give you a few examples here. When we particularly need to relax, because there might be intensity in the situation, or we can feel that there's reactivity or aversion coming in, or judgments, or the thoughts are becoming too dominant. We can, for example, breathe in to the count of 4 and then breathe out to the count of 6. And this is a relaxing breath. Breathing into the count of 4, relaxing, exhale to the count of 6. And so what we're doing then is we're favorizing the slow out exhale, which will naturally relax the system. And then we can do the contrary. If we're feeling lethargic and we're lacking energy, we can inhale to the count of 6, and exhale to the count of 4. So we're focusing on the inhale, we're generating more energy on the inhale through the number of seconds that we're breathing. And then we're cutting that exhale a little bit short. So that is the generating breath. And then the third technique that we can use when we want to harmonize, when we want to be peaceful and to be calmly abiding in ourselves, is we can be inhaling and exhaling to the count of 5, or 3 and 3, or 4 and 4. What we just want to do for that harmonizing breath is to make sure that the number of seconds that we're breathing in is the same as the number of the seconds that we're breathing out. And that will harmonize our sympathetic and parasympathetic systems. And this is the methods that are being used a lot in coherent breathing. And they're very simple and they're extremely effective. And this is really quite, almost would seem diametrically opposed to what we're doing when we're doing a breathwork session. But in fact, we are actually following what happens in a breathwork session, because in a classical breathwork session, we are intensifying the breath a lot in the beginning of the session. And then we're coasting along in the middle of the session when the energy is moving us along and we're journeying into these inner realms and resolving issues and transcending limitations. We're breathing a more even breath. And then towards the end of the session, we're naturally breathing a relaxed breath. So we can take what we do in what's known to us as a breathwork session, and we can apply it in small doses all throughout the day. And like that, we're continually reestablishing, recalibrating our system and reorganizing that, bringing the system back to homeostasis, completely in relationship to the different thoughts and feelings and emotional states that we're experiencing. So we are really learning to be masters of our own internal environment and keeping it in a state of best condition to get on with our day. It's a very, very useful skill.
And keeping us in best condition to be in union with whatever arises within us and outside of us during the day. Because union is, you know what I really love about taking conscious breathing like this in a very moderate and discreet way out into the marketplace, is that in a certain sense, we're vulgarizing union, but without reducing it, because I feel incredibly respectful about union and what that is. But really what I'm saying is that union is possible in pretty much every moment and in pretty much with all things, especially if we just continue to remember that we're talking about small things. We're talking about small moments, because a day is made up of many, many, many small moments, and every moment counts. Every moment is an opportunity to deepen the connection, to stay connected with ourselves. There's this really lovely saying, I'm going to read it to you, from Nisargadatta Maharaj, 20th century Advaita Vedanta guru. We might know it. I want to remind us of it. Wisdom is knowing I am nothing. Love is knowing I am everything. And between the two, my life moves. Between the two, my life moves. Myself is nothing, because ultimately I'm nothing. Knowing I'm everything, because ultimately just as much I am everything. Love teaches us that we are everything. Wisdom reminds us that we are nothing. And between the two, my life moves. Life moves between small actions. And so knowing and remembering that, we can use the breath to keep reminding us of this
smallness and bigness of ourselves.
Yes, each breath is just this little moment of consciousness, and yet breath itself, one after the other, and in all beings, all humans and many mammals, is this huge force. And so I'm so grateful that you have expressed so beautifully many ways that we can orient ourselves towards the breath to experience our most deep and authentic nature, which would be the most fulfilling and joyful. And I want people to know, Judy, that if they would like to be in touch with you or want to learn more about your work, that your website is judygee.com, which is JUDEE, and then G is GEE.com. Judy, thank you for being with us. Is there something that your being would like to say to everyone around the globe that's listening right now?
There is a last quote that I would really love to read because it just gives me so much joy. And so I'd like to share the joy I have from this quote. It's a little bit longer, so here I go. This is from Lao Tzu, a 5th century Taoist master. And in this wisdom, he says it all. Here we go. If you don't realize the source, you stumble in confusion and sorrow. When you realize where you really come from, you naturally become tolerant, disinterested, amused, kind-hearted as a grandmother, dignified as a king. Isn't that delicious?
Yes.
Kind-hearted as a grandmother and dignified as a king. I feel that this is really why we could all learn to breathe consciously, and why we could all take the journey to delve into the inquiry of our true nature, because it makes us kind-hearted. We become kind-hearted as a grandmother. There's something so soft that happens when we remember who we are. And I would dearly love the entire world to become kind-hearted and to embrace kind-heartedness in others, because I do sincerely have the conviction that that's the way for us to come through, dignified as a king. In other words, holding to our truth, holding to ourselves with stability, and soft and sweet. And we can get to that place through breath work. And many of us are. So, yes, I live in hope.
And thank you for sharing that hope with the world right now, Judy, and for being a door opener for people to be able to see why it is and how it is that we could connect with breathing, for intimacy, for surrender, for joy. Thank you, everyone.
Yes. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you for joining the Breathwork Summit, brought to you by the Shift Network. To learn more, visit breathworksummit.com. To learn more about our global programs to support you in waking up in all the areas of your life and taking inspired action, visit theshiftnetwork.com. Thank you again for joining us and for sharing this empowering path to embracing optimal well-being through conscious breathing.